Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the very first episode of summary of the Quran, which I am doing for the month of Ramadan. The month of Ramadan, we all know, is the month when the Quran was revealed. It's mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, the second surah, verse 185, as well as in the famous Surah Al-Qadr, 97, verse 1. The Quran is God's word, fully preserved, and it's guidance for the entire mankind ever since it was revealed for until the day of judgment. So obviously, it's the most important text that humans have with them, and therefore it's important for all of us to know and learn how exactly we can understand this book. How has the guidance been arranged by the Almighty? I'll mention a few realities before I go into explaining in the form of a summary, the first part that I've chosen for tonight. There are 5 realities which I would want to talk about the Quran, which are going to help in understanding the text of the Quran better. One reality that we all know of is, but it's important that we keep it in mind when we are reading the Quran, that the Quran has been arranged differently for the purpose of it to be preserved for all times to come. And this arrangement of the Quran has wisdom in it. It has been arranged in a manner, and it's a substantially different arrangement from its historical sequence, the way it was revealed to the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. It has 114 surahs, call them chapters, and there are 7 surah groups which have been arranged in a way that each surah group has, to begin with, one or a few Meccan surahs revealed before the migration to Medina. And in the second half of the group, there is one or more Medinan surahs revealed after the migration to Medina. So there are 7 surah groups, Meccan and Medinan put together. Almost all Quranic surahs, except 6 exceptions, are in pairs. So if there are 114 Quranic surahs, 108 of them have been arranged to be divided into 54 pairs. And then what we also ought to know is that each Quranic passage, each Quranic surah chapter is coherent in its theme, in its message. Different passages within a surah are linked with each other in a way that if we are able to unfold the wisdom that's lying hidden there in their arrangement, we learn the Quran much more and be able to get impressed and influenced by its message. The second important thing is that the fact that I've mentioned that it was revealed in a different arrangement was because the Quran was meant first and foremost to be an important tool, the most important tool in the hands of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, who was a messenger as well, to be a warner for the people, a nazir for the people to whom he was sent directly as delivering God's message to them. That reason, that need necessitated that the Quran be arranged in a way that it responded to the immediate needs of the messenger while he was delivering the message of the Almighty to his immediate nation, who, if they would have said no, and which many of them did, were to be punished by the Almighty, as indeed has been his way, his sunnah, his policy regarding all messengers. So what we find, therefore, not surprisingly, is that in the present Quran that we have with us, some verses are the ones which were meant for that purpose. They are era specific, and there are many others which were meant for that particular era as well as all times to come. How to distinguish between the era specific and the universal verses is something which we come to learn when we read the Quran carefully and ponder and reflect upon its message deeply. The third important thing that the Quran mentions about itself is that it's the ultimate criterion that the Almighty has sent to distinguish between right and wrong, truth and untruth. The Quran mentions it in Surah 25 verse 1, the Quran mentions it in verse 213 of Surah Al-Baqarah, wherein he says that the book of God comes to decide amongst men in the religious matters that they disagree in. We must also know, in order to understand the Quran, a fourth point, which is that the Quran has been expressed in the pristine classical Arabic. And in order to appreciate the Quran, we ought to be aware of the fact that its language is a masterpiece of literary presentation. That's the way it has been presented. So it should not be read as a newspaper, it shouldn't be read as a novel, it shouldn't be read as a book of philosophy. It's a book, it's a masterpiece of literary presentation, expressed, couched in the language which was a pure classical Arabic language. And finally, the Quran tells us something that ought to be there in the book of God, which is that the Quran has no contradictions. And therefore, whenever we read the Quran, we ought to keep this principle in mind and should know that the book has many verses which are brief, comprehensive, like a seed. And then there are others which explain those brief presentations. That is, there are principles and there are implementation of principles that we find in the Quran. Now let's move on to understanding this book. The very first surah of the Quran is Al-Fatiha, which is the first surah of the Quran as well as the very first surah of the first group of surahs, which is comprised of 5 surahs, 5 chapters. The first one is the only Meccan chapter, which is Al-Fatiha, and the subsequent 4 chapters, surahs, are Madinan, Al-Baqarah, Al-Imran, An-Nisa and Al-Ma'idah, 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th surahs respectively. The relationship between Surah Al-Fatiha and the rest of the Quran, as well as the rest of the 4 surahs of the first group, is the relationship of a dua, a prayer, a supplication and its response. So we are making a dua to the Almighty in Surah Al-Fatiha, and the Almighty has responded to what we have asked Him to do for us in that prayer in the form of the Quran, which is God's guidance. So we have to read Surah Al-Fatiha with that understanding in mind. It's a prayer which was there in the minds and hearts of all well-meaning good humans who were there at the time of the revelation of the Quran, looking for truth, looking for guidance. The Almighty has given words to their feelings, to the yearning need that they had inside them. So the words are of the Almighty, but the feelings were the feelings of all good people who were looking for guidance. The surah begins with expressions of gratitude, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, because that's the starting point of all religious motivation. If we are inclined towards God's religion, it's because we want to be grateful to Him. We are expressing our gratitude. And we then mention the fact that God is merciful, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. His mercy is profound, His mercy, kindness is forever. And then we also mention our feeling that this life is incomplete, it's unjust in many cases, many ways. There has to be another life, and God is going to be the master of that day, master of the proceedings of that life, Maliki Yawmiddin. It is followed by a commitment that we make to the Almighty that we are going to worship Him and Him alone, Iyaka na'budu, and we are going to seek help, assistance from nobody except Him, because He is the only one worthy, capable of helping us in extraordinary ways. Then comes the point when when we read this surah, we ask the Almighty for help. We have come thus far on our own. Our own nature, our own intellect guides us to come to the point wherein we say that, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Oh God, show us the right path. Then we go on to explain what that right path is, the path of righteousness, like the one that He enabled those people to have who have gone, left this world after having successfully gone through the trial of this life. They were the righteous people on whom God's mercy was showered. And those people weren't the ones who went after their desires, and therefore they were led astray, nor were they the ones who were influenced overwhelmingly by their ego, and they were seeking spiritual guidance from elsewhere, not from God. So we are asking God to give us that kind of guidance, so that we also get helped. We also are treading the path of righteousness which the Almighty wants us to follow. That's Surah Al-Fatiha. It's a compact, it's a complete, even though brief surah. No wonder, therefore, that we have been asked to say this prayer, recite this surah in every rakat unit of our formal prayer. Because even though the Almighty has responded to this prayer by giving us the Quran, we still need to remind ourselves that that's what we are looking for. So whenever we read the Quran, let's not forget that we are actually seeking guidance from the Quran, moral, spiritual guidance, something that all humans need, something that if a person is able to get, he gets what is the very best we can expect to have in life. Now, the relationship of Al-Fatiha and the rest of the Quran, as I said, is the relationship of prayer and a response to the prayer. The entire Quran is a response to our prayer to the Almighty that we need guidance, so show us the right path. But in particular, the first two chapters, the first two surahs immediately following Surah Al-Fatiha, Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran, the second and the third surahs respectively. As I mentioned earlier in the introduction, most surahs of the Quran are in pairs. So is the case with Surah Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran. They both form a pair. They both begin identically, Alif Lam Mim. Their endings are very similar in the form of prayers. And if you look at the contents of the two surahs, they too are very similar to each other in that we can divide both surahs into two almost equal parts. In the first part, in both surahs, the Almighty is addressing the people of the book, whom the Almighty had given guidance before the revelation of the Quran. And in the second part of both surahs, we find that the Almighty is addressing the believers who have received the Quran and have believed in it to be guided through the Quran, to follow the path that the Almighty desires from them that they should follow. We will cover in this brief time that is available to me from the first verse till verse 141 of Surah Al-Baqarah, that second surah. The first 39 verses of this surah are a prelude. They are paving the way for the first and the second big chunks of the surah to then be mentioned. I'll mention a few themes that we are going to cover, well, which are covered in this first passage that I'm doing. The surah begins with Alif Lam Mim, which are disjointed letters, huruf muqattat. They are read separately. Each alphabet, each letter is pronounced in a way that they are not put together to form a word that we normally do with letters. They do carry meanings, but what exactly do they mean needs considerable research, which hopefully is something that is going to continue. We do have very clear indications that these letters do have meanings and that their meanings have got a very direct relevance with the surahs that they are a part of, that they begin. I'll talk more about it in subsequent summaries, but right now let me proceed to the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, which are essentially telling us that the Quran is the awaited book. The people of the book were waiting for a book from God, and this is the book that the Almighty has revealed for them. And it has already become a book of guidance for those people who are prepared to believe in the unseen world, who are saying their prayers regularly, who are giving in charity from the wealth that the Almighty has given to them. They are the ones who believe in what was revealed by God before this Quran, and they are believing in this Quran as well, in this revelation as well, and they are convinced about the next life. These are the people that the Quran declares are the successful people. So the Quran came as a book of guidance, and almost immediately it caught the attention of good people, and the Quran is describing their features, thereby suggesting that all those individuals who would want to benefit from the Quran will also have to have these features in them. Then we talk about, we see that the Almighty is talking about in verses 6 and 7 the fact that those who are not interested in understanding the message of God will never ever be able to understand it. Their hearts have been sealed because of their lack of interest, because of their overindulgence in their base desires, because of the fact that they've got such inflated egos that they would not accept a message that is coming to them through a human individual like them. So God says that if they are not interested, then He has decided that He is not going to help them in understanding the message of the Quran. Verses 23 and 24 are mentioning the fact that the claim of the Quran that it's from God, it's divine, is something that is borne out of its inimitable presentation. You read the Quran with an open mind and you are struck by its brilliance. This is not just talking about people who are living in the present times, it was more particularly true for those who were living at the time when the Quran was being revealed, and they were the people who were masters of their language. They had outstanding poets within their ranks. They had orators, who were critics of the language, who had appreciation and taste of pure classical Arabic language. And all of a sudden they find that a man who is very well known for his piety, for his moral uprightness, but had no interest practically in poetry, in oratory, or anything that could be described as literary excellence. He comes up at the age of 40 with a message which he claims is from God, and the message is expressed and couched in a language which is sublime, which impresses thoroughly. So the Quran says that if there are people out there who think that it's not from God, then it's an open invitation, a challenge, that they should come up with a book, not a book, but a chapter like a Quranic chapter, as impressive as any of the Quranic chapters. And the Quranic claim to divinity would collapse. But the Quran says that if they are not able to bring it, respond to the challenge, and they will certainly not be able to do it, then they should fear the fire that is going to burn all those people who are knowingly rejecting the truth coming from God. Verses 30 to 33 and thereafter 34 to 39, they are telling us about two important lessons that we need to draw from the happenings of the starting point of human journey. The Quran tells us that when the Almighty declared that He is going to create man, humans, the angels were not convinced, and the Almighty helped them understand that what He has decided to do is fair, is wise, and it makes a lot of sense. The angels thought that this new creature is going to be given freedom to choose to do whatever she would want to. And therefore, what's going to happen is that they're going to misuse this freedom and will cause mischief on earth, and they will kill each other. And the Almighty helped them understand that even though what they're saying is not completely incorrect, yet they don't know the whole story. And if they were to know that this freedom is going to enable some people to become as great in virtue and piety as one could imagine, and that's the reason why he is creating this species for these humans to have freedom and yet to stay away from misusing that freedom. But at this beginning point of human journey, the Almighty is also telling us through the story of Adam and Iblis, the Satan, that before you embark upon the all-important human journey of test and trial, be absolutely clear about the fact that in your process, in your journey, you will have two important challenges to meet, to always face and confront. One of them is going to be the challenge of ego, of arrogance, which is what Satan, Iblis, symbolizes. He refused to bow down to Adam, despite the fact that he knew that the Almighty is asking him to do so, because he thought that he was superior. So the Almighty is telling us that don't do that, or else you will fall into the same trap. And the other is the evil of the prohibited tree, which was the extramarital sex, which is what is going to invite humans towards itself and would cause the individual to be corrupted, to be led astray, and therefore one has to be careful about it as well. After mentioning these important starting points and principles, the Almighty now invites first the people of the book, the children of Israel, from verse 40 onwards, in a direct address to believe in God's latest and the final message. They are invited to believe in the Prophet they already knew, because his arrival was prophesied in their books. And the Almighty is telling the children of Israel in particular that their flawed religious understanding, which is because of the fact that they have corrupted their message, is not helping them in acknowledging and believing in this latest message of God. And the Almighty is saying that one of the reasons why these people are casual and not serious about understanding God's message is that they think that the life hereafter is not going to be a serious problem for them to worry about, because they are going to get the help, assistance of intercession from their elders. And the Almighty mentions in verse 48 of Surah Al-Baqarah that there's going to be no intercession on the day of judgment that would cause the Almighty's decision to implement justice to be influenced. So no intercession whatsoever, forget about it. Perform well and you will be treated well, or else you're going to be doomed. On the judgment day, therefore, one will face accountability in the purest form of justice. The Quran tells us in subsequent verses that there were many incidents in the history of the children of Israel wherein we see that they did wrong, knowingly and deliberately wrong, many things. And as a consequence, they were punished. And God says, وَمَا ظَلَمُونَا, they did not harm us, وَلَكِنْ كَانُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ, instead they harmed their own selves, their own souls. Then in verse 62, God Almighty is talking about a very important principle that the people of the book had forgotten, that it is not an individual's belonging to his association with a certain religious group or sect that is going to enable the individual to be successful in the next life. Whether you are a Jew or a Nazarene Christian or a believing Muslim or a Sabian, whoever believes in God properly and the last day and does good deeds, he is the one who is going to be successful in the next life. So the misunderstanding amongst the Jews that it's only the Jews who are going to be successful, that has been clarified. And the Quran tells us that in their history there were some Jews who did not take the message of the Almighty seriously. They were non-serious about it, even while God's great messengers, prophets were there. So for example, we are informed that Musa alayhi salam, he delivered God's direct message to a group of Jews, telling them that God wants them to slaughter a cow. Instead of abiding by and doing what they were asked to do, they started asking questions to somehow stay away from following this instruction, which they wanted to avoid. And they asked, what kind of cow would you want us to slaughter? What color? What kind of activities the cow is to be found engaged in, etc. And he says that as a consequence of their attitude of avoiding to follow what the Almighty was asking them to and making fun of it, actually literally, their hearts hardened, and they were therefore not able to understand God's message properly anymore. And that's what the message of the Quran is, that if you are going to avoid understanding and following the Almighty's message, whether in the form of the book or whether what's there inside us, in our conscience, in our sense of morality, If we continue ignoring God's expectations, then our ability to distinguish right from wrong disappears. And that's what has been mentioned metaphorically as hardening or rusting of hearts. And these people, they had this flawed understanding that they're not going to get the punishment of fire except for a few days. And the Almighty tells them that that's not true. Whoever does wrong deliberately, knowingly, no matter who he is, it's going to be punishment in the fire forever. The Quran tells us that the adverse attitude of the apparently religious Jews was because of their dishonesty and immorality. They claimed that they were the favorites of the Almighty, and they therefore didn't want to follow his message properly because it demanded from them serious commitment to the message. And they raised baseless allegations, they asked senseless questions, they made criticisms which had no substance, so as to not be asked to accept this latest message of the Almighty. And they started opposing not just the message but the messenger as well. And they went so far in their hatred and enmity of the message that they resorted to black magic, which is what is mentioned in verse 102, and claimed that this is something that we are doing, which Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam also did, and the Almighty categorically refutes this claim that Solomon ever indulged in magic. These Jews and these Christians who were the immediate addressees of the Quran, they said that if it's the hereafter at stake, let it be very clear that only Jews are going to enter the paradise. That's what the Jews said. And the Christians claimed that only Christians are going to enter the paradise. لَن يَدْخُلَ الْجَنَّةَ إِلَّا مَنْ كَانَ هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَى. That's what they used to say. The Almighty says that that's not true. Any human who is committed to the Almighty and is focused, he is going to have his reward with his Lord, and he will enter the paradise where he'll have no sorrows of the past, no fears of the future. Then from verse 127 onwards, the Almighty is telling the Jews, the people of the book, that this sanctuary, this holy mosque building in Mecca, the Kaaba, is the construction which was erected by their own great ancestor Abraham. So the Almighty says, وَإِذْ يَرْفَعُ إِبْرَاهِيمُ الْقَوَائِدَ مِنَ الْبَيْتِ وَإِسْمَاعِيلُ. Tell them, inform them about the fact when Abraham, along with his son Ishmael, they were erecting the foundations of the house of God, and they were praying, رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. Oh God, accept this contribution from our part. Indeed, you are the one who is listening, all knowing. God is telling them to follow the path of Abraham and to know that this prophet of ours who is delivering this message is actually the one who is representing the true message brought by Abraham. And therefore you will do well to accept and acknowledge him as the messenger of God. Because it was while this house was being constructed by Abraham along with Ishmael, they were praying for a prophet to come to this city to show them the way. And that prayer has also been mentioned in verse 129, wherein the Almighty says that both father and son, they prayed, رَبَّنَا وَبْعَثْ فِيهِمْ rasulam minhum. O God, send to them a messenger from within them. That is, he should belong to the same nation, tribe, community. Yatlu alayhim ayatika. He should recite to them your verses. وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. And he should teach them the law and wisdom, moral principles and beliefs. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. And as a consequence, he should purify them and take them to the path of moral and spiritual excellence. So, it is as a response to that prayer that the Almighty has sent this messenger, who was born in Mecca, in the same city where the Holy Kaaba is located, who was given the message of God, and he's delivering it to you and inviting you to accept what you already know in your books, through your books. So that's what the Almighty is telling the Jews in particular, both Jews and Christians. And that's what is the message of the Quran in general and of these two surahs, Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran in particular, to the people of the book, that they do indeed belong to a great tradition of religious guidance that has come from God. It started from Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was chosen by the Almighty. He had two sons, Ishmael the elder and Isaac the younger. And God decided that from now on, guidance for mankind is going to proceed from this family. It was children of Israel. Israel was the son of Isaac, who were chosen first to be the representatives of the Almighty's message. And that's why you are the chosen people. He talks to the Jews about it. But now, going by the same scheme, and it was decided beforehand, that the message, final message, is going to be delivered to the last messenger, who would belong to the progeny of Abraham, but this time round it's not going to be the children of Israel, not the children of Isaac, but the children of Ishmael, who will be chosen, and the prophet has come to you now. So know him, acknowledge him, follow him, and you will be on your course to salvation and success. Finally, the Almighty mentions a verse twice to emphasize the point that what he is mentioning in this verse is something that's extremely important for all humans to take seriously, but more particularly for the Jews, and now I can say also for Muslims. This is verse 134 and 141. The Almighty says, Tilka ummatun qad khalat. They were a people who've gone. That is, your ancestors, the prophets, the pious, the righteous people, about whom you talk so proudly. But they've gone. Laha ma kasabat. They are going to get the benefit of what they did. Walakum ma kasabtum. And you will get the benefit of what you will do. Wala tus'aluna amma kanu ya'malun. And you are not even going to be asked about what they used to do. That is, your pride in talking about your ancestors, in referring to them, in claiming that you belong to the same tradition, is not going to be enough for you. They are going to be benefited because of the good work that they did, about which you are so proud. And be absolutely sure that you will benefit from what you will do. Their piety, righteousness is not going to help you. And therefore, take God's message seriously. This life is a trial, and it's a very limited opportunity available to you to excel in it and to be successful in the next life. You're not going to be asked by the Almighty as to who your ancestors were and how did they perform. He's going to ask you about your performance in this worldly life. May the Almighty enable us to understand His message properly, and may He enable us to follow it as best as we can in this life of trial.